Thank you for welcoming me to this year's BCMSA conference. I'm pleased to be here with you and to talk about digitizing data to keep municipal employees safe. Let's start with the first slide and get right into the material. So digitizing data is actually, just wanted to do some broad concepts before we actually dive into the details of it. There's 5 things really that you need to keep in mind anytime that you're going through a digitization process. There's 3 types of digitizing, or going digital, as they would say. The benefits, you always have to be very, very clear on what the benefit streams are, because those inform what factors you need to be concerned about and how you build the solution. The priorities, priorities from internal as well as external customers, and what you're going to actually gain from it. The timing, really, it's a good time to go digital at any point in time. Converting, planning it all out is something that you can do when you have downtime. The actual timing of when you implement it should always be considerate of if there's lulls in the data flow itself. And then people, always need to consider the people, both internal and external, and how this change management process may impact them in the end, and how are they going to benefit from this digitization of data going forward. So the 3 types of going digital, as we would say, is digitization, which is the process of making information available and accessible in a digital format. Digitalization, which is the act of making processes more automated through the use of digital. And then finally, kind of the epitome of it, is the digital transformation, the process of devising new business applications that integrate all digital data and digitalization or digitalized applications. So first, digitization. Most of you are probably doing this already. Customer fills out a form, you take it in, a clerk enters that information into a source system within your municipality. That's essentially digitization. Digitalization, the next step, is probably the next logical step that most of you are at, and it's the one that actually gains you the greatest values, and one that we'll be talking about mostly through this presentation today. And then digital transformation is only when you have completed the first 2 stages can you move to digital transformations. We've been involved in a number of those programs, and they're extremely beneficial to municipality. But I always say, let's keep things simple, start with the basics, and then build your way up to the next steps. So the examples of 3 types of these going digitals, the digitization, we have mentioned, or we may mention later on in the presentation, the crew talk sessions. What we've done with various municipalities is to digitally capture the topics that are presented in the crew talks, who's attending the crew talks, when they happened, etc. Even to the point that some municipalities want staff members to sign a document or something like that. We can do it all through either a smartphone or a tablet, or if there's a laptop there. So that's one digitization. Accident reporting form is another good example of this, where we've digitized forms so that it's not a paper-based form, but it's actually on a tablet or a device within the vehicle, and it goes directly through to everybody in City Hall, whoever of course needs access to that. The digitalization examples that I want to present to you today is really kind of 2. One is the COVID-19 self-screening tool, which we partnered with the BCMSA to put out to about 36 municipalities around British Columbia during the initial stages of the COVID pandemic. And with this, we captured information and then routed it through to various departments within the city, safety, HR, as well as supervisors of the people coming into the city halls or the municipal facilities. The second one, training for seasonal workers. This was an example of where we took information that would have been presented in a classroom setting and put it through a digitalization process where it became an e-learning program, and the staff that were onboarding in the summer could actually do it on their own devices in their own time, or certainly at least socially distanced within the engineering operations department. And then digital transformation, I probably won't touch on this depending on how much time we have, but one of the examples is a registered recreation program customer satisfaction survey, where people register for the recreation program. Upon completion, they receive an invite to complete a survey. That survey data, along with their registration information, is then fed into automatically into a dashboard, and calculations are made and so on. So it provides a richer data set, a richer understanding of recreation programs and everything that's going on there. So, the last one I put there is, how can your team benefit from going digital? Maybe going through some of these explanations or examples today will give you some pause to thought about what you could be doing to improve the digitalization process and, of course, ultimately the safety of your employees. So the benefits, I must say, are just beyond, or are beyond just safety. Safety is certainly paramount today because of COVID-19, but beyond just the safety, we have improvements to operational metrics, so the quality, the cycle times, customer satisfaction, increased operational agility and capacity are certainly things that can be optimized through this process. Increased efficiency of functions, employees, and organizational teams. And yes, sometimes I hear from managers or frontline staff, well, how is this going to affect what I'm doing in my job? And I'll often say, well, you're going to have less errors. You're going to be able to focus on getting more important things done than managing data or inputting data or calculating what the data actually means. Growth based on improved interaction between employees and the processes, and of course with the end customer in all aspects of municipal operations is again another benefit. The development of unique processes that focus on the customer, both internal and external, can be extremely beneficial, again reducing the number of do-overs or the number of complaints or the number of issues that come up because maybe some information was written down and it wasn't very clear. I know my writing or my penmanship is terrible, and I'm sure that if anybody's transcribing what I've written on a form, it's not going to be very accurate. And then the last point is more effective change management through better assessment and mapping of solutions and the overall impacts to the municipality. So those are really some big, broad benefits that you get from going digital, and certainly one of the most critical ones for this period in our lives is the safety aspect of employees. So easy way of breaking this down is to ask the overarching questions. And we all often do this before we get to the how, because the how is really the meat of it, and I'm going to go through a couple of examples with you. So the what, why, where, when, and who. So let's jump into each of these individually. So the what processes can benefit from increased accuracy, timeliness, safety measures, convenience, capacity, and the integration of data. Why are you changing this process? What end results are required? Is there improvement somehow in the process, capturing the information and putting it into a digital format? Where does the data come from, and where does it need to go? Often what we've done is we reduce the time lag or the time period between when the data comes into the municipality through a digital form and how quickly it moves through the city so that you can take action on it or make decisions on it. The when does the data come in? When does it need to get to the various decision makers? The recreation satisfaction program and other satisfaction programs like that If something is amiss in a facility or a parking area or something like that, we have systems in place that are digital. Customer can make a comment. Those automatically get routed to the appropriate facility manager, and then they can take action. So it's that type of instant when you need the information. And of course, finally, who. We can never forget about the who, because if there's going to be any resistance to this type of change, it's going to be from the people in the process. And so ultimately, we want to ask the question, who needs this information? Where are they? How can we get the information from the source, wherever that happens to be, to the end users? And in what format do they need? So again, those are the 5 W's, the what, why, where, when, and how, or pardon me, who. But let's go forward and talk about the how. So the process we've been using at the W Group for a number of years now, I think we started doing digital smart forms and digitization projects probably about 6-7 years ago, initially with the City of Surrey, but then we've expanded it to include a number of different municipalities. So this is the process that we've used, and I'm going to reference this throughout my talk today. And certainly I think the presentation will be made available that you can take a snapshot of this, and if you follow this process, it will in fact help you. And I'll show you how we use it to develop some of these processes. So first and foremost, the vision. Define the vision of business goals for the digitalization process. What are you actually trying to achieve? The identification, identify processes to be digitalized. Maybe you're not doing this wholesale review of everything and you're not doing the vision, but you got to start somewhere, and that is identifying where there may be a pain point in the organization. Information is not going through quickly enough. Information is coming in and it's inaccurate, and so there's causing errors which cause additional work, etc. So you really want to define the benefit streams for this process and how you're going to resolve, or how you're going to get those benefits if you take it digital. The overall analysis is really analyzing the existing process to identify all opportunities for improvement. The redesigning of the process, creating the digitalization process using existing or really simple to employ technology. The software that we use for most of this, ironically, is called Simple Survey. But it's also, it's not only a survey tool, but it's also an extremely powerful digital form process and tool that we use as the platform for most of this work. Evaluate. Once you've gone through and you've redesigned it, make sure that you test it, and you test it. So the reevaluation, test the digitalization process to ensure it's meeting all of the needs of the benefit streams that you're looking to satisfy. And then go ahead and implement it. You want to make sure that you monitor it closely, because it's very important to ensure that it's not causing any hiccups or data throw-ups or anything like that. And then in the end, you want to optimize it. You want to set a regular schedule to go back and review it, because from time to time, things change. Requirements change, information changes, language, so how you label a form or a process might change. You want to go back and review it. Just because it's built and you're not hearing anybody complain about it doesn't mean that there maybe isn't a problem or an opportunity for improvement in the future. So this digitalization of the COVID-19 self-screening tool, I suspect many of you either possibly use the COVID-19 self-screening tool that we developed, or you used some similar process. I'm going to step through now this framework, this process that we use for digitalizations, and giving examples of the actual COVID-19 self-screening tool. It was a tool that we developed, and we have it here. It was Early on in the pandemic, we had some discussions with the City of Surrey. We identified there may be a need for this type of tool, and we started looking at how we might be able to solve this challenge. So we had the identification, what the process was, the COVID-19 self-screening tool for use within the municipal environment. How can we manage this process while avoiding staff interacting with one another, which was one of the main issues, or passing material back and forth. Most municipalities, when they got the notice in November 2020, started immediately using the self-screening tools, which were paper-based with pens at the front door of municipalities, and they realized early on that that wasn't really that safe for the employees. So they looked for different solutions, and that's where I think our tool really helped to satisfy all of the benefit streams and work really well for them. So we really dug into what are those other considerations that were at play. We gathered and analyzed existing screening tools to understand the components of the process and determine how they could be improved. So here's an example of a self-screening tool that was being used at the time by a municipality. We have all the language here you're probably very familiar with, either at your own municipality or through other places of work or enjoyment. So there was a number of points here that didn't work very well, and I'll just bring those up. The challenges that this form presented were it did not support social distancing. So there had to be an interaction. There had to be somebody attending this at the entrances to City Hall, because they needed to make sure that everybody entering City Hall completed a form. Paper and pens changed hands, constant sanitization, all of that just was not very convenient. The lack of clear instructions with this, it's, if you answered no to any of these or yes to any of these, do this. If you answered yes to this, do this. If you answered yes to this, do this. And it wasn't very clear to a lot of people. And we actually sat down and walked through this process with a number of municipal staff. We did virtual meetings, of course, but we realized that where the problem was, or one of the problems, was the lack of clear instructions. What were they to do if they came up with a fail on this self-screening tool? So the capacity was problematic. Everybody comes in at 8:30 in the morning, and you have a lot of people, and you've narrowed it down to 2 or 3 entrances into City Hall. Now you have a backlog of at least a half an hour for everybody to go through their paperwork and fill it out. Timing and access, again, part of that notion, very difficult. Accurate contact information. We noticed in seeing some of the samples and talking to some of the safety officers at different municipalities that people would often just, handwrite their last name, somewhat illegible, or they would use their first initial and last name, and there was 3 or 4 people with the same first initial and last name, so no indication who this was. Reporting out was next to impossible, because at the end, if you had 100 staff coming in, you'd have 100 forms, and you may know if somebody failed one of the questions, because hopefully they'd get the instructions clearly enough and leave the premises and contact their supervisor. But beyond that, you really didn't know who was completing it and who wasn't completing it. So ultimately, what it did satisfy, and this was of course one of the reasons why we brought it in, is that it became a public health order in November 2020, and WorkSafe BC came in with this requirement. So it did satisfy compliance, but it didn't do a lot of good for safety people within municipalities themselves. So here's kind of the aspects and the benefit streams that we developed by doing the analysis. The factors: capacity, timeliness, prevents exposure, staff privacy, huge one, notifications, directions, compliance. Those were the key factors that we had to come up with a solution, a single tool that could solve all of those solutions and provide the benefit streams. So the aspects were for capacity, independently administered. And the benefit stream, it maximizes access capacity. So there was no a half-hour backlog because it was done individually on staff members, either personal smartphones or their municipal smartphones before they even entered City Hall. Covers current health activities, so it's accessible on demand. You have a lot of people coming in doing different shifts at different times. Firefighters, we did a special self-screening tool for firefighting departments in different municipalities because of their 12-hour shift on and off. So that's accessible on demand. Socially safe protocol. It maximized staff safety because there didn't need to be any interaction whatsoever. The front doors of City Hall didn't need to be gated or manned or womaned by anybody checking any of the results of the self-screening tool. Limited data and securely stored off-site. A lot of municipal employees were concerned, well, what if I come back and I say yes to one of these answers and now I'm potentially getting tagged internally as somebody who has COVID, where I may not have COVID, I just may have been exposed to somebody with COVID. So that negative impact of that, they were concerned about the privacy. And we were too, along with the municipality. So we ensured the process would actually maintain the privacy of the employee. Notifications, automatic alerting, instant management notifications. So the system that we set up and most municipalities who used our tool actually utilized was a case that if somebody actually failed one of the questions, not to say that they had COVID, but they may have come into contact with somebody who had COVID, an email alert would automatically go through to their supervisor and or HR and the safety person. So there was instant notification across City Hall that this person is not going to be in today because of possible exposure. Clear guidance on fails. I'll show you a sample in a minute so you can see what that looks like, but it maximized the safety for the staff and of course safety for, or the health of the staff and others in the building. Weekly pass reports. This was the providing evidence of compliance. So through this analysis, by using this process of how do you digitize a system, how do you digitize information, we came up with these factors very quickly, addressed the aspects, and then devised what the benefit streams would be and went forward from there. So in the end, the redesign phase of the process, we designed the self-screening, SSL secured, digitalized form, touch-free, automated workflow capable to be used independently, that is socially distant, by employees even before they entered the workplace. So remote access via business card QR code. That was, by the way, an ingenious solution that the city of Coquitlam came up with. We provided all the municipalities with a QR code so they could post those on their doors and so on. They decided to take it one step further. They put it on their business cards, handed out business cards to all the employees. The employees then had access to that screening tool in their vehicle or at home before they went into the workplace. So it was perfect. They didn't even need to walk up to the front door. If a screening, self-screening fail occurred, staff would receive immediate instructions, no guessing what they were supposed to do, and supervisors and or HR would receive an email alert automatically. And then weekly, HR received the complete roster of all staff passes, and as a separate email, all staff fails. And neither one of these were noted as pass and fail. They were just, here's the people that went through, and here's a separate group of people that didn't go through. Very, very sensitive to the language about labeling somebody that potentially has COVID or not. So that's the redesign that we went through. And from that, of course, we put it into place, we evaluated it, reevaluated it, made sure that the base form that we came up with in this process was rock solid and was going to deliver clear, accurate results day in and day out to municipalities. And that's what we then paired up with BCMSA. They put the word out to municipalities, and in the end, these 36 plus municipalities came on board, started using the form, and so we implemented it. Not everybody implemented it exactly the same. I'll give you some different examples, and this is where you have this base process. You know that the base process works well. Sometimes you need to revisit this digitization process over and over again to make sure that you're capturing all changes in the actual form that you're using and the process that you're using. So the optimization, again, we went back and made sure that there were some things that were going there. So what we're going to do now is show you a copy of the COVID-19 self-screening tool that we developed. This sample, ironically, is the BCMSA's tool. So we'll just put that up on the screen and take a look at it. So you can see here that basic information at the top, the PHO that was issued, and so why people are being asked to use this form, basic registration information for each employee every time they are going into their workplace, first name, last name as separate fields, making sure that it's clear, their email address, the supervisor's email address. On a drop-down list, there was only 3 supervisors in BCMSA. The date, so today's date automatically gets connected in there. The current time automatically gets recorded in there. And then we had the 3 questions, whether there was any symptoms, and then exposure or being out of the country. So one of the aspects that we wanted to be clear on is, in fact, how clear the instructions were to an employee. You can see the form here, it's all marked as no's, but if an employee actually selected a yes, answering one of these questions, automatically you would see down at the bottom, they have the red text there, giving them clear directions of what to do. Now, if they added another yes answer, there would be another set of instructions, and the third one, a third set of instructions. So hopefully nobody ever ran into that scenario, but it was very, very clear to the employees what they needed to do. So going back to the no's, so we can see here, person put in the 3 no's, and they have a pass message, and they're indicated they can go through to work in the facility. If their symptoms come on during the day or anything changes, they're also provided instructions. Now, part of the implementing and the optimizing and so on, we looked at these forms. They were all in the end individually unique forms for the 36 municipalities. This one, the BCMSA decided to include a signature field, so that signature field was there, again having a confirmation that it was actually the employee that completed it. I think we just left it in there for them as a sample. So initially, the first question here with all the symptoms was where they were individual questions. So I think there was like 11 or 12 symptoms initially, and you had to answer yes or no to each one of those. We pared that down through, again, always trying to optimize. We pared it down and said, you know what, it doesn't matter about all the symptoms. It only matters if they're saying yes to one of the symptoms. So we just tweaked the wording of the question a little bit and combined all of those, saved staff members a lot of time, a lot of frustration, and still made it extremely effective overall. Success measures for this, the COVID-19 self-screening tool with the assistance of the BCMSA is, in the end, there was 36 plus municipalities, 500,000 staff screenings from November all the way through to the end of June, and more than 1 million email notifications. And those email notifications weren't all fails by any means. There were positive and negatives in there. So customizing the base, I'd mentioned that we went through this process and we customized the base. We had it, or we created the base. We knew that base was solid, it was fully tested. We rolled it out to municipalities. And as a result of that, several municipalities came back to us and said, yes, we love it, we want it, but we want to make some tweaks to it. So again, using exactly the same process. Sometimes it's the analysis, sometimes it's the redesign, and evaluation, implementation, and so on. And I'll bring up a couple of examples here for you. So this first one, I believe, the adding additional participation streams, I believe that this was for the District of North Vancouver, and we'll click through on this in a moment. Yes, the District of North Vancouver, they came back to us and gave us a challenge of, hey, this is great for municipal staff, but what we really want to do is we want to make sure that we have it covered for contractors, for visitors to City Hall, as well as volunteers at the various facilities. So you can see as we're clicking through the 4 different options, they requested different information based on who you were coming in. So it was an all-in-one. Whoever came into City Hall used the single form, single QR code, and they were able to access, and it automatically routed through to the person responsible for this individual coming into City Hall. So if it was staff member, routed through to supervisor. If it was a contractor, routed through to the person responsible for that project or program. The same with a visitor, who that person was visiting in City Hall, and a volunteer. Where was that volunteer going? Who was their on-site supervisor? So again, taking the base form, we reused exactly the same process to build, to modify, to customize, to satisfy the requirements, the benefit streams that the District of North Vancouver wanted to see. So this is one example where take the base and rework it using the same process. We'll flip back and we'll bring up another example. Now I noted in the BCMSA's example that there was 3 supervisors' email. This is the City of Richmond. Probably, actually not probably, absolutely the most complex, multifaceted form that we created through this process. Very simple at the outset. First name, last name, supervisor's email, today's date. We have the same, they have a lot of symptoms, but we use the same process of yes, no, for all of the symptoms combined. There was 3 questions in addition to the symptoms, so 4 questions overall. And again, the same, you're safe, go ahead, or whoops, you're not safe, let's not go forward with the thing. Really, really clear language on this one. But what's interesting about this form is when we get to the supervisor's email and we click that drop down and scroll, there's hundreds of supervisors that were being notified individually when their staff members came in. So yes, long list, added some time to the staff doing it each and every day, but it made their program very strong and it satisfied their benefit streams, what they were looking to achieve during the program. So that's an example of where you create the base and you still revisit exactly the same process to make improvements or adjustments to the process if required. So digitalization can often establish new best practices. I've forwarded through the process to get to evaluate, to give you a sense of another scenario that we ran into, again, using this process, where we ran into an evaluation hiccup. So while we were creating e-learning programs to replace in-class training, our design team hit a programming challenge. You're probably familiar with most of the learning programs out there, the e-learning programs, or even in-person programs that are set at an 80% pass. The challenge with the software that we were using, again, the simple survey in our scenario, is that we couldn't program easily moving from one module to the next module to the next module and give people an 80% score or passing grade. We had to do it as 100% passing grade. So this was a hiccup, a challenge definitely that popped up in the evaluation phase of creating this. And this e-learning program, the first one we developed like this was probably 5 or 6 years ago. So it wasn't COVID-19 related, which is a good thing. So it forced us to think past this challenge. And so we went to the next level. And the solution was, as I mentioned, requiring 100% to advance from one module to the next. Through this, though this created a quandary of what to do with participants who didn't get 100% the first time they did each module. Have them review the material again. Now, some of the material, they might have spent 10 or 15 minutes reviewing it in the first place before they took the first quiz. So to ask them to go back and spend another 10 or 15 minutes because they got one question incorrect just seemed a little unfair. So we took it to the next level and came up with what we would do, which is, here's an example of soft tissue injury reduction awareness e-learning course that we developed with the City of Surrey. This was part of the summer staff onboarding process that we developed this year for their 80 plus staff to come in and be trained remotely before they started work versus being in class. So I've gone through and I've pre-selected the answers here so that I get one wrong. Because, you know, when you go through these testing, you get to memorize the correct answer. So let's say you were going through here and you just finished watching 15 minutes of video and you hit that next page button and, oh no, which of the following are considered safe lifting tips? Shoot. Okay, so I got one wrong. I go to the next page. What am I presented with? Proper lifting technique. A short video that gets me to review the material I need to see in order to answer that question again and do it successfully. So we go to the next page. I've reviewed the video. We go to the next page and I'm going to answer the question, all of the above. Now let's see what happens. Wonderful. It's great. I finished the course. It's great. So instead of the frustration of pushing employees back to review 15 minutes of material, we come up with this solution that instead of the 80% score, we were going to force 100% score. And in the end, this new best practice was created, which we use across all of our e-learning programs. And the bottom line here, because it's the 20% that you don't know that can get you hurt or killed. So instead of allowing people to go through all of these safety trainings and all of the other compliance e-learning programs, getting an 80%, our hiccup with actually implementing it forced us to look at the option of 100%, which forced us to look at the option of how do we review just a slice of the material. And then we realized it's that material that they don't get when they go through the quiz. It's not common sense to them for some reason. That's the material that you really want them to focus on. So we came up with a method that satisfied the 100% and still gave the staff that 20% knowledge that they didn't get, that wasn't common sense to them. So it ultimately made a best practice by running into it. And going back to the starting point, it was this process that led us to coming up with a best practice, and one that safety clients are really, really quite pleased about. We're about to go into the Q&A session. There's my cue for the Q&A session. So thank you very much for attending my session today. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.